stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
That is real life. It is from the historical archive. But it's also a moment that was contextualized to great effect by the iconoclastic filmmaker Michael Moore in his documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, which led the skepticism against a conservative administration and often bipartisan industrial war complex. Many elites from D.C. to L.A. blasted Moore at the time as too liberal or too dovish or too critical or even conspiratorial in his view of U.S. policy in the Middle East. Public, it turned out, had a pretty different view than those power brokers or narrators. That movie remains the highest-grossing documentary of all time, and one need not embrace its every claim to see the thrust was at least prescient, challenging how fear and narrow interests hijacked U.S. policy, tying it to a costly Mideast adventure that continued on 20 years through this week. Moore is our exclusive guest tonight. Right now, this is his first interview since the end of this war. He's also streaming a free presentation of the original Fahrenheit 9/11 through michaelmoore.com, where he just relaunched his newsletter on Substack. People can sign up there for free. The screening, if you want to watch it, is September 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern. And Michael, let's get right to it. I want to begin with some of your warnings back then.
They offered to give up their lives so that we can be free. And all they ask for in return is that we never send them into harm's way unless it's absolutely necessary. George Orwell once wrote, "The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous."
Michael,
Right.
Thanks for being here. You struck a chord, but it took until this week. Your thoughts here?
Right. So no points for being right, really. Because if anything, I feel like, what could I have done better 20 years ago or 18 years ago when we invaded Iraq to communicate to the American public that we were making a horrific mistake that would cost us thousands of American lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi and Afghan lives. So there's no celebration today. Ari, thank you for having me on this day, because I think that we need to learn our lessons from the past. We lose these wars because the wars are wrong. There are wars we have fought that were right, and we won them. My fifth great grandfather, as I learned from Henry Louis Gates last year, was in the Revolutionary War. I never knew that. But so many of us have so many people that have fought for this country for so many years for the right reasons. But for the last umpteen years, 20, 30, even 40 years, it's been for the wrong reasons. And I don't want this to happen anymore. I don't want to lose any of our young men and women. I don't want to kill people in other countries who pose no threat to me or you or anybody else, who've never attacked us. I think that I'm so proud of President Biden, who I did not vote for in the Michigan primary. I voted for and I worked for Bernie Sanders. And I have been completely surprised and feeling that we're all blessed to have Joe Biden in the White House in these last months, his first year in office, all the things that he's done, not just in standing bravely and never walking it back like a politician, and especially a Democratic politician would. They would get afraid of the Republicans and the right wing telling them that he was a coward and they were withdrawing from Afghanistan. And Democrats have such a history of walking things back like this. He wouldn't walk it back. He just said, no, this is wrong. I promised you when I ran for office, I'm pulling those troops out. This war is going on way too long. And it's exactly what he did. A politician who kept his word. And yes, you can have the discussion of how crazy it went at the end, but all evacuations from Dunkirk, before and after, caused, I mean, Churchill's considered a hero with Dunkirk. There were 15,000 Allied lives lost in trying to evacuate those soldiers off that beach in France at the beginning of World War II. It never goes right. It never goes well. Loss of life is incredible.
Right.
We got out of this. God bless the 13 who lost their lives and the other 20 who are wounded. Thank you. Our condolences to their families. But this has just been amazing. And honest to God, didn't you, Ari? I mean, I've felt it ever since they were killed last week. We're not going to get out of this. We're not going to get out of Kabul without another attack before this is over. And yet,
well, that's
exactly that's what happened. And in fact,
we watched this. Michael. I mean, I'll jump into that point. We watched this closely. Yeah. Well, we watched this closely, and we confer with reporters, experts, people on the ground, and that was the other fear is terrible to see the loss of life, trying to get out. Now they're out, which is why it's a very real ending. We showed the photos here. You say that, no great victory intellectually in being right, but we have to learn about why this was hard at the time, because everyone can make up their own mind. That's sort of been a theme of this COVID year. But boy, we should be working with the right facts and history. And the thing is, the next time there is a fear or a threat, Fahrenheit 9/11 was very effective, and you might mention how many people watched it, but that's because it was very effective at showing how fear is designed in a mob mentality, even in democracy, to short-circuit the thinking so people run on to the next war. How much so? I have one other clip, and then we can keep going forward, but we are going to go back before we go forward. People talk about liberal Hollywood and this and that. You were shunted off the stage and half booed, mix of boos and applause, when you went into the heart of Hollywood to talk about this. That's how people have to remember what it was like in the time, post 9/11, attack any Middle Eastern country. Let's look at your remarks briefly there.
We live in a time where we have a man sending us to war for fictitious reasons. We are against this war, Mr. Bush. Shame on you, Mr. Bush. Shame on you. And any time you've got the Pope and the Dixie Chicks against you, your time is up. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think the last line there.
I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something, and then I'll let you. That's what it looks like. You were there to be honored because you did something that was supposedly award-worthy, and you spoke on the topic of which you were getting the award. It's not like you went off topic, Michael. And the people who run those things in Hollywood and the rest, right, it's all out in the open. You could see the room. I mean, from what I could tell, you'll tell us how it was on the stage, but from what you could tell on the footage, the room wasn't exactly with you, and they played you off the stage rather than let you speak against the war. What do we learn from that for next time? Go ahead.
There's your free country. Yes, the microphone was being lowered too. What it was like is that I knew I had to say, this was the 5th night of the Iraq War, the Oscars. That was, how could I not say something, especially because this movie was about violence and guns and everything. And so I said what I said, and it, a few days later, the studio that was going to fund and distribute my next film ripped up the contract and said, we're not doing anything with you. And nobody would do anything. And yes, it's a lonely place to be. Look at Barbara Lee, the only member of Congress that voted against the Afghanistan war. So every Democrat in the Senate and every Democrat in the Congress voted for the Afghan war except her. And I've talked to her over the years. It's a lonely place to be, but that's okay, because I know people, Americans are good, and they will eventually come around. So yes, David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, wrote an editorial in The New Yorker, liberal magazine, endorsing the invasion of Iraq. Not only him, 29 Democratic senators voted for giving Bush the power to invade Iraq. I mean, go down all the various liberals that supported these invasions And I knew sooner or later they would come around. They would see how awful this was, and they did. And now, by the time Biden was running, you've got a presidential candidate who always voted for war, usually, Biden, was a law and order guy in the Senate. And now here he was saying, I'm going to end this war, and we're not going to have these wars of aggression anymore. We will defend the American people. But that's it. If it doesn't have anything to do with defending our lives, we're out. And it's dishonest to our young men and women to say, please volunteer to protect our lives, when they're then sent off to wars that have nothing to do with protecting our lives.
Right.
It's
right, which is what you say in that film as we look at, well, what is the limiting principle here? What do we owe the people who do this? I want to continue with you. Loyal Beat viewers will know we actually have our shortest break. It's just 60 seconds. And I want to get into the domestic priorities that we can turn to when you free up this part of the budget. Michael Moore's here, and we're back in 60 seconds.